to America is be true to what you said on paper.
Well, good morning. Welcome back to At the Round Table with me. I'm your host, Larry Ellison. My co-host, my brother, I'm not even saying my brother, Dr. Bradley. The doctor is in the house here to give you a checkup from the neck up.
Well, I'm back.
Back and he's black.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I'm proud of it, baby.
He did clear up that implant question, folks. So if you're texting and
no, it's dental, bro.
It's a dental implant. It's a dental implant. He's still Dr. Willie Bradley.
Yeah, the brother don't bounce that way, man. The brother doesn't bounce that way.
You keep walking right into these, right? I could just respond to that.
No, leave it alone. Leave it alone.
Last week it was the gas. The 66. Like, okay.
Yeah, leave it alone.
I'm not listening. I'm keep it family here.
You notice Pastor Hobb is real quiet.
Yeah,
Man. He just give you a smile like, don't turn it on me.
Nah, he's like, I'm keeping my mic off. I'm just sending the comments.
I'm just giving you guys. I'm doing my job as an engineer.
There you go.
And that's just it.
He's not refereeing. It's fine.
I hear you.
Hey, we want to thank our sponsor, Guarantee Rate Mortgage. For all your mortgage needs, give branch manager Cora Holbrook a call at area code 508-345-4726. Guarantee Rate Mortgage Company is located at 75 State Street in downtown Boston, Mass. Guarantee Rate Mortgage Company, guaranteed to exceed your expectations. Also on that note, folks, there's a lunch and learn going to be held today. Mamleo is inviting you along with Guaranteed Rate Mortgage branch manager Cora Holbrook at Mamleo headquarters at 61 Columbia Road in Dorchester, Mass. Today from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m., like I said, lunch and learn. Join us to let us help you navigate the ins and outs of real estate buying in this challenging market. We will give you the insights on what affects your credit score. For those with credit challenges, we will give you the helpful information. So, folks, like I said, it's free to attend. Just give us a call. Give Cora a call at 508-345-4726. Just so she can get a head count to make sure that you're fed well today. So like I said, if you're going to be attending, just give her a call this morning. It's not too late. You can stop by, even if you don't. But like I said, the courtesy call is really just so we can get a head count. Again, that's today, 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. at Mamleo headquarters at 61 Columbia Road, right at Columbia Road and Seaver Street today.
Brother, I have to tell you, I do like this title, Lunch and Learn.
There you go.
I get a full belly and a full mind.
That's right. Usually it's listen and learn, right? Lunch and learn.
That's a good title.
Right?
I don't know who thought of it. It sounds like Cora, though.
I can't take credit for that one. I can't take credit for that. Also, folks, today is early voting starts today in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So, folks, you got to go to wherever you live in the Commonwealth. You go to your site there and find out where it is that you vote and go out and vote. Like I said,
I usually do it early just to get away from the rat race, and I'm very busy, so I don't want to have a situation where I forget, and then the next thing you know, I don't vote. So I usually get out early, get it out of the way. That way I can just not worry about it. I have made my contribution. And
to that point, Dr. Bradley, I myself, because you've been in law enforcement for a long time. A lot of times for us, this was not an option. No. You'd had to have a special permission to vote early, right? An absentee ballot. You couldn't just do it the way you do it now.
Yeah, exactly.
A lot of times, the reason for us was that we ended up having to work, right? The polls, right? In some capacity. If you're working that day, you got ordered. You didn't get to the polls.
You didn't get to the poll.
Right.
I mean, you got there, but you had to work it.
Right. It wasn't there to cast your vote.
It's not there to cast your vote.
So you were locked out. So this is, like I said, I'm like you. When I leave this event today, Cora, I'm going to shoot down to my town hall and cast my vote.
I'm doing the same thing. Two things I'm going to do is get my vaccination, booster, and do some voting.
Yeah, exactly.
You got to exercise that right, man.
Well, people are still dying for it, and folks, people, if they didn't think it was important, they wouldn't be trying to take it from you.
Well, they definitely wouldn't be arresting you.
That's true.
for doing
That's
it.
True.
That's the cornerstone of any democracy. Is voting. When people try to eliminate the vote or reduce your chances of voting, your democracy is in trouble.
Look at countries that don't have democratic voting. Right? People are saying, America used to tout themselves as being a democracy. If nothing else, we accepted the will of the people when it came to elections, right? We contested them in some way, right? But once it was resolved, even with Al Gore, right? And that one was very closely in a lot of people said the Supreme Court decided Gore and George Bush, the junior, that he accepted that. He didn't say the Supreme Court. He didn't go out there bad mouthing the courts. He accepted that the courts had spoken. That's our democracy. And that had to be a stinging. This here wasn't even close. Well, this was a made up the vote.
And I think it's been proving over and over again that he knew that he had lost the election, but he really didn't care, and they made it, he and his minions, they made it clear, we're going to just declare that I won anyway, and then I want you to stop the voting.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Who are you to tell the state to stop the voting?
But they'd already,
in a democracy,
it had already been planned, even before a vote was cast, that if they this was the situation. If we're behind at this time, we're going to declare, because we know that the early voting is usually done by Democrats. Those votes don't get counted till later on in the evening, right? And it'll look like these votes came. Where did these votes came out of nowhere? They didn't come out of nowhere. They came out from the people that voted. It just hadn't been counted yet. And sometimes it takes days. These larger states, it takes days for them to get their tally in there.
But it's very clear that the voting, and this is where I think the democracy is in trouble, because you have some Trumpers who are in a pretty good position to win their Secretary of State positions, and now these individuals will be in charge of voting come up for 2024. But voting in our Constitution, in our structure, is controlled by the states. Yeah, you know what I mean. It's controlled by the state, and then when you certify those ballots, that's a ceremonial. Right. It's not. It's a ceremonial process to say yes, we receive what the states have sent us. These ballots are legitimate, and we count them. And because the Electoral College, each state has the members of the Electoral College, and you're dividing those members up. That's the purpose of it. And so once that is done, it's done. But it has shown a weak spot in our in our governmental structure, in our form of government.
Good morning, caller. Welcome to the roundtable.
Good morning. I'm Larry and Doctor and Reverend. I appreciate you guys doing this show and the information you guys provide to the community.
Thank you.
And I just kind of wanted to bring up the point in regards to this has been Donald Trump's motive operandi memo from day one, when he was sued by the people of color for discrimination with the department. The lawyer that he had, which was the guy who came from the McCarthy era, from the communist the trials that they had at that time. He was one of Trump's lawyers. He was also affiliated with Nixon. But what he told them was, like, although he lost the court case, he says, "What are we going to do?" He says, "We're going to go out there and tell all the newspapers we won."
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that was the whole thing with you heard, Steve Bannon, he was over in China, I believe it was, and he was telling the folks that Trump is going to declare, and if he's behind by 11 o'clock, he's going to declare this. So the plan was already in place. But and you cannot do this without willing participants, right? So folks don't care. I mean, it's like they know, like in Georgia, that Herschel Walker is not qualified to be dog catcher, let alone senator from their state. But he'll vote the right way, so that's all that matters. He's a breathing. It's like Weekend at Bernie's, right? You prop him up, and he'll do whatever you want.
Well, Herschel Walker is a sad case. That's the first thing. He's easy to control. The second thing
about the concussion.
The second thing is that he is an example of what racist white folks do all the time when they're caught, when they feel like, the black people realize, the people of color, they realize the importance of the vote, and we can't actually stop them. So what we will do is give them someone that they can vote for, but we can control them. Right. And so Herschel Walker is someone that they can vote for because they look like him, but we can control him. He's going to do whatever we want him to do. He's not going to think independently. He's going to look for us. Well, I hear you, brother.
Can't use what you don't have.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you.
But Rose, we stay on the line because we want to switch gears because we want to talk about what we're planning to talk about in this hour, and we can talk about the politics as well a little bit. But the violence that is taking place here in the city of Boston with our youth, with our elders, our statesmen, Gene McGuire, just got out of the hospital, assaulted viciously, walking her dog in the park. Last weekend, we had a young girl. 3 people were shot, and a 24-year-old lost her life. There was a young woman that was shot this morning up in the Dorchester area. We had a 14-year-old that was shot earlier this week. The violence. Another 14-year-old that was murdered last Monday. The violence, and then just the violence that we're seeing young people inflicting themselves in and out of the schools. Where are we going wrong here? Dr. Brell, I know you were charger of public safety in Randolph for quite some time. Had you seen it this bad? I mean,
Well, I haven't seen it to the point where I haven't experienced it.
Okay.
To the point that you and I were talking about off air. But I have seen, I knew it was coming.
Okay.
Because I had similar situations in, not as severe, but when I was a director of climate and safety in Randolph. And my response was to one of the young ladies, listen, I wasn't there when the child was conceived. This is your responsibility. I mean, I understand that there's an element of child care that happens that every school district has to deal with.
Yeah.
And that facilitates the parent going out and doing their job and working. I get that. But you can't just outsource the care of your child without any responsibility on your part to me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And and then when without if I try to discipline the child the way that I see fit, I'm in a lawsuit. I'm in probate. You know what I mean?
Right.
It doesn't work that way. So you need to play a role in this process. And oftentimes what I find is that the apple didn't fall too far from the tree. I had one particular individual, female, who was loosely dressed, and just revealing.
Inappropriate.
And I said to her, man, you can't come into this school like that.
Sounds like the mother the other day. Yeah.
You can't come into the school like that. So therefore, you have to go home. You have to put on clothes. It was so badly. I felt uncomfortable talking to her.
Right.
And so one of the female teachers put a coat around her, and so we sent her home. The mother came. And she was complaining, but the mother was dressed worse than the child.
Well,
I was like, "Are you kidding me? That's where it's coming from."
That Cambridge. I was at a meeting, and it was a Cambridge police officer. And that she was actually brought up on charges because the mom complained, and they have a name for it in Cambridge, that you can't slut shame individuals, so that people come to school dressed like that. It's you can't comment on it. Like we know that when young people, particularly young girls, come dressed like that, it's a distract. You got these young boys with all these hormones, right? And even right. So right. And so the fact that you're protecting that type of behavior, and then when someone sees it as inappropriate, we're not talking about someone that comes to school with their hair braided, right, in a style, or some colored nails or whatever, right? But we know when things cross the line, right? And I'm in agreement. I think that's why I've always been in favor of uniforms for kids, right? Because one, it takes that pressure off the parents and the kids about, whether somebody can afford the $100 sneakers or jeans or whatever.
The social issues. Takes the social pressure away.
Right.
I don't disagree with that.
Totally agree on that with the uniform.
Yeah.
But, Rhodes, what do you think is contributing to this violence we're seeing here in the city? I haven't seen it like this in a while. And like I said, even back in the day, Dr. Brell, like I said, you served the city of Boston for quite some years. There was almost like a code of conduct, even with the criminal element, that you didn't shoot children, you didn't shoot grandmothers, you didn't shoot women. I'm not saying that you should shoot anybody.
And you don't rob churches, by the way.
Right. And you don't assault 91-year-old matriarchs.
In fact, you won't have to worry about the police. We'll deal with you.
Right.
The criminal element had their own, code of ethics. Yeah. And that was them. I think what's happening here is a serious destruction of family. Which is the basic building block to society. I think all authority and all respect for people and all respect for people's belongings start in the home.
But what do you think is the contributing factor to what you're just saying? Because that's a very powerful statement.
Yeah, I think the contributing factor is the frontal assault that society controlling group had on men that look like you and I.
Yeah.
You know, and use the criminal justice system to respond to drugs and other things that now they're using the medical system to respond to incarcerate those men. And now that you have a incomplete family unit, this is the net result of that. That's my opinion.
Well, okay, Rhodes and Dr. Brown, help me out, because I was part of that. My dad was not involved in my life, but I the difference back then was I had surrogates who stepped into those roles. I think there's a vacancy of that, a vacuum of surrogates who are willing to, and people are more emboldened to say that a child doesn't need a father, right? That
well, brother, what's happening in our communities? Those social control mechanisms are being clearly eliminated or clearly, undervalued.
Yeah,
the churches.
Right.
The schools.
Yeah.
These were all social control mechanism organizations that were involved in my life when my father was not there.
Yeah.
By the way, because he was forced out by the welfare system.
Right,
all right?
right.
I'm gonna be very honest with you. So, but you had those individuals and those organizations who were willing to step in and provide that structure.
Yeah.
That's not there today.
You said it reminds me of that movie Claudine. Exactly. when the social worker comes over and they have to hide all the decent stuff and had to hide the man in the closet.
Yeah, exactly.
Had to hide James Earl Jones in the closet because you couldn't have a man. There was a breakdown in the family. But
it was all about breaking down the family.
Yeah.
So now you have broken down the family. Who's there to teach the child at a younger age to respect each other, respect people's state of being, respect people's equipment or property, have a respect for life in general.
Yeah.
And so when you don't have that, and then that individual now grows up to be a younger man with all those emotions and all that strength, there's nothing internally to control it. There's no internal mechanisms there, what we call values and moral values to control it.
I think this is going to be my last broadcast because the 7 o'clock hour didn't help me, and this is just getting worse.
You got it zero, bro.
I know. At 9 o'clock, I think we're going to just do a rebroadcast and go home because it's all we're left to do. Yeah. So, Rhodes, what do you have to say to Dr. Bradley's comments? Because I mean, they're right on the mark, but they're just not very uplifting to our situation.
All I would say is, let's connect the dots and actually see this as a multi-faceted, tiered problem. The fact of the matter is, besides the fact that they've broken down the family, Malcolm X said, why are we entrusting the slave masters to educate our children? And he brought up the point that we should be involved in educating our children. But if we kind of look at the way that he says that they break down the family and the violence, it's part of the American DNA. Violence has always been how we've achieved it. It's we don't talk about how they just basically slaughtered the Native Americans and brought us in. It's we couldn't enslave them.
Yeah.
Let's bring these people in so we can enslave them and control them.
Yeah.
And so it's always been about
But also, what our court system has really been more designed for is that they think that, okay, the father doesn't need it either, but the financial support, that's just a small part of it, because you can send a check, the government can send a check, and when they do, it doesn't change the dynamics of not having that.
Well, brother, we're fathers. We know the vicissitude of fatherhood and the issues that's associated with fatherhood, especially being a black man and being a father. Well, a check doesn't provide guidance, brother.
There you go. Right.
A check doesn't give. A check doesn't identify those teachable moments and say this is what you should and should not do. A check doesn't talk to a child about values and understanding, and a check doesn't actually show them what a quality education can do for them, as opposed to an education in the street can do. All a check does is make sure that the individual is fed and probably help with the home. You have to participate in the process. I mean, I raised 5 kids. I only planted 2. All right? But I raised 5. And I can tell you from experience, when you have a complete family unit, so when the man of that house can show a little boy, this is what a man does when he appreciates and loves his woman. All right? And he can show a little girl, this is what love looks like in your home. That child is going to grow up with a whole different perspective on life.
No, you're right, because I know when I come home and my 2 daughters hear that key come in the door and they run There's nothing like it. Nothing like it. But it's an experience that I didn't have with my father because he wasn't there, you know, with my mom. But and so at first it was kind of foreign to me because it was something that was like, oh wow,
I'm the focus,
right,
right.
You know
what
I
mean?
And that dad, it means a lot to them. So like I said, you know, again, we're seeing an uptick in violence in the city. It's almost reminiscent, and people say, you know, like to say, well, it's not as bad as it was last year. See, that in itself bothers me because
that's a sad commentary.
Thank you. Right, because now we're basing this on statistics. Ask that family if it's one homicide, if it's one victim. Ask them if they care about statistics on whether or not you know your numbers are down or we don't have as many of them. Right, one is too many. And I think it's like, you know, when folks are, you know, that they solve a homicide and they say, well, we hope, you know, this brings you closure. Don't tell people what closure is, because for that person, just because you solved the case doesn't close their feelings.
Well, I tell you what would be closure if I can look up and see my loved one again.
Right.
That would be closure.
Right. And that can't happen.
That can't happen.
Right. That
you know
can't
what I mean?
happen.
So how do you prevent from someone else from having to deal with that issue of losing someone? You know, so it's not an easy answer to
so
that
Rhodes,
question,
what is you think is some of the solutions to getting us back on track, right, where we value each other in a way that we see? You know, I was just, you know, talking to Dr. Bradley, you know, about the video of a brutal beating. I mean, there's been so many this week. I'm not kidding you, of incidents where young people are just brutalizing each other. And what stood out besides that was the number of adults who were watching. And I can understand some of them afraid that they're going to turn on them. But back in the day, you wouldn't even hesitate.
No, see, but that's there lies the difference. Because as you were talking, I said to myself, you know, kids are kids. I mean, we got into fights when I was a kid. I'm going back into the 20th century, mid 20th century. We got into fights. It happened. But what end up ultimately happening, you would feel a strong arm pull you up by your collar and say, "Boy, I'm gonna tell your brother, I'm gonna tell your sister or your mama, your daddy. I know them, and they're gonna jack you up." And you start negotiating with them, saying, "You know what, you're right. Can we leave this here? Because you know what, I just got out of a tough fight, and when I go home, I can't fight that person because I mean they're bigger, they're stronger, so on and so forth." In today's society, what they do, they turn their back to it. I don't want to get involved. I don't want to have a situation where someone's coming after me. I don't want to have a situation where, you know, I got to go to court. We got to be vested in our own community. I said it during off the air. We have a problem here because we have outsourced the safety and security to one entity in our society, and that's policing. The community just said, my hands are up. You handle it. You get paid for it. No, it's got to be a process here. It's got to be a collaborative effort to deal with this issue.
But Rhodes and Dr. Bradley, with the recent changes in the law of criminal responsibility for children under the age of 12, was saying that they're not even responsible for their behavior. That's so. Even those entities as law enforcement, as you said, that used to be able to go in and help, can't even give you any assistance any longer because they're saying it's not a crime. But yet, you're expected to still deal with these problems in the homes and in the schools and in society, right? When you're saying society has said, hey, we want you to have a hands-off approach to them, but we are not going to replace any type of structure for that age group.
Well, but my question would be: you don't think that this, the immaturity that we see in the streets of Boston are not happening in white communities?
Yeah, but there's a support system for it, right?
That's the difference.
It's, you know.
In my opinion, the solution of what are the support system that's keeping the white child, who's also experiencing, whose brain has not developed as maturity yet. You know, what are the support systems that they're doing in that community to keep that child in order, and why can't we have those systems here?
Well, it's true. I mean, we Boston Public Schools spends almost $1.4 billion with a B, $1 billion a year.
Yeah,
just in Boston Public Schools.
And you know, you have some countries whose gross national product is not that.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Exactly.
Yeah, I'm serious.
Right. And, I mean, probably someplace like Haiti, right? I'm sure.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
think about
Right on this hemisphere.
$1.4 billion would do a lot, right,
exactly.
for a country, right?
Exactly.
And we're talking about a school district, right? $1.4 billion. And yet we're not really seeing much in return for that investment, right? But the biggest missing piece, like the other day, we had a student had an issue at one of the schools. He calls the family comes down and attacks the staff, right? This is all day long. I feel like I don't work for the police department anymore. I'm working for the fire department.
So where are the social workers then?
Well, in their office, waiting for the police to come because not my job to be assault, and I get it. But this is what I'm saying is like you're acting like you're going to you've replaced a public safety. They no longer have school police in the buildings anymore. Mm-hmm. We never had a physical presence, those of us who are police officers, in the schools like other cities and towns across the Commonwealth, where they have a resource officer physically in the building. We don't have that presence. So you removed that safety component. Now, how do you have learning going on if you don't have a safe environment?
You can't. I mean, you ever heard of Abraham Maslow?
Yes.
The hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
The very first level, the very first need that you must acquire, and you have to go through these needs in order to to be successful. You know, so the very first need is physiological. You know, you will not address anything else unless you deal with your ability to eat, to stay. You know what I mean? To clothe yourself, so on and so forth. Yeah. Then the very next need is security. Yeah. So you can't. Education is at the top of that pyramid. So if you don't deal with security, you can't get to the top of the pyramid.
That's why in the suburban towns, right, that they can focus primarily on learning because that is not a problem, right? Yeah. And that's the difference, right? And when you try to make folks understand that, like Rhodes, you attend that meeting that I'm at every Wednesday. Think tank folks in there from the community, stakeholders, city, and yet what dominates the conversation in that room, Rhodes?
The violence,
and mainly our young people, and inflicting, and these become adults with the same violence because we haven't got the behavior under control, right? You live in the city, right?
No, you know where I live.
Okay, right, that's right. Okay, but let me tell you.
But I did grow up in the city.
Okay, so here's the thing, right? Yeah. So here's the thing I'm gonna ask you because I promise. When you leave from where you are, you live outside the city.
Yes.
When you're in your town, do you have a different feeling? And I'm at Dr. Bradley's question. Do you have a different feeling in that as you get closer to driving into the city of Boston, do you change how you're like? Does your elevation of your anxiety or your elevation of I need to now be on guard more? And then when you
your awareness definitely, you are aware of your surroundings.
Okay, all right. Okay. So when you go back to your neighborhood on your way out, do you start to see it to dissipate as you get further away from the city? Am I just?
Well, again, you see less people. There's less interaction. Again, you just see more of like structure. Because when you're in the city, people are on the sidewalks down the road. While you're more in the suburbs, it's like again, you just see the structures of houses, but they're not people walking out like necessarily. And there isn't like a gathering section where people are just like out on the street.
So Dr. Bradley and Rose, I'll be okay. So. Would you go and Would you go and shop in the Stop and Shop at South Bay if you needed something?
Well, yeah. I mean, like, I've gone in to the Stop and Shop in Grove Hall.
Oh, okay. You're a brave man.
Well, let me see if I'm going to ask you a question. Because I do go through this, what I call this psychological metamorphosis. In the sense that I go through a psychological change when I'm moving from Randolph into Milton into Boston. I do, like this young man just said, your awareness is peaked. And I don't know, I'm not quite sure that's because of knowing that I'm going to a city where you have this concentration of humanity, and because of that concentration, and because of that concentration of humanity, you have a plethora of opportunities, criminal opportunities. Criminals tend to focus around where people are, because you have more opportunities to commit crime. And then another part of me realized that policing in itself is all about the city. In fact, the city is actually incorporated into the word into the title police. Police come from the word polis, which is a Greek word means city. It's Greek for city. So the criminal opportunities are in there. So I'm not quite sure if that is because I realize that there's a possibility that I may have to take care of some business, and more so in the city than it is in Randolph. But I do go through that that psychological shift that you're talking about. I'm not, I feel bad about it, but that's just how it is. The reason for it, I hope I did a good job explaining it, but I do go through, I know what you're saying, but how do we address it? What do we do about it? Why shouldn't I be able to go from where I live to a city to entertain myself or show my wife my appreciation for her, without having to worry about should I wear my firearm?
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying. So would you go down to the McDonald's at Mass and Cass, Rhodes?
I wouldn't.
No.
Why not?
Okay, I'll do the drive-through.
You would go to the drive. See, I wouldn't even go. To me, it doesn't look clean, right? It doesn't look like inviting. The environment doesn't say, hey, oh yeah, this is a place for me and my family. Even a drive-through.
But why shouldn't it though?
You're right, but I'm dealing with the reality. You're right. You're absolutely right, Doctor. I should be able to go anywhere, just like a 91-year-old should be able to do what she's done on a daily basis, is to walk her dog in the park without being assaulted in the way that she was, right? But we also know the reality, and this is not a blame. See, I think sometimes politicians, when we highlight these things, I'm not blaming them. But what I do think is, if you're taking and you're running and your platform is you're going to address these things, and then when you're not, and then people say, well, hey, I'll hold you accountable. You said that this was what you were going to do. You had solutions to these problems.
Well, see, that is where the lack of understanding of our government structure plays a role in blindsiding our citizens to think that one individual can actually solve that level of problem.
Well, remember your Donald Trump when he said, I alone can fix.
It doesn't happen that way. That's not where our system is structured.
Right.
Remember, we have three co-equal, equal branches of government. With equal power. It doesn't happen that with the government. He just can't wave a wand or think about, declassifying documents, and it happens. It doesn't work like that. It's a process.
Right. So, Rhodes, how do we, again, I know this is probably a question, how do we get, and Dr. Bradley, how do we get back on where we value each other as human beings? I mean, I guess for me, my big concern is violence in general. But the fact that I'm seeing it at younger ages, I'm seeing it at 5 years old and young. I mean, where kids don't even understand what they're doing, but they're inflicting it on each other, the violence. So what that says to me in some ways is this is a learned behavior, because at that age, you don't even know enough. Kids will hit each other or take the toy, but the violence I'm seeing at this young age, it's not normal.
And as a matter of fact, that you said that the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree, and sometimes it's actually even encouraged. And the parents are like, good fight. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, instead of saying that's not a good behavior, they actually reward the kid and say, hey, you won the fight. That's good. That's good. You show, And it's like, I mean, granted, you have things like on TV, like the parents are watching Jerry Springer and those kind of TV shows. Where,
and that's every day is a fight, right? Yeah. That's the entertainment value, right? That's how you deal with conflict.
And then, so, I mean, granted, like some people don't even understand that the WE, the WF, like the rest, it's fake, it's staged, but to them, that they consider that real.
But you know what? You bring up a very good point, Rhodes, because, this is why most of the shows that actually have a pretty much a dominant black cast in it, they're not positive, right? The Housewives of it's always dysfunctional, right? And they think, that's how those folks operate. I refuse to be part of that. I will not even watch it. You know.
Well, see, you know, the thing is that a lot of our people throughout society form their opinions and expectations about things and other people based on what they see on television.
Yes.
You know, which is why I think, you know, a part of the solution is watching or controlling what our kids are exposed to. Because I watch football games. I'm a football fan. Every once in a while in my office, I have a television on the wall in my home office, and I may flip through the channel just to change the sound, and then I may stop at a particular show, and I'm seeing all this violence, and I'm saying to myself, and you don't see the connection between the video games, and reality,
right?
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that's the direct connection.
But like I said, not just that. If you go through programming, and but like I said, if 95% or more of the cast is all black, it's like black. It's no positive relationships. Everyone's cheating on it. That this is how this segment of people operate, right? There's nothing.
Get rid of the cable, man. Get rid of the TV.
You can't flip. Like I said, I watch National Geographic, things like that. Nature, like I could not watch that with my children.
No, I refuse to.
Right.
And when and if my kids happen to be in the vicinity, when I'm watching something, when I'm flipping through something, I flip it off, or I say to them, you know, that's not reality, right? You understand that our people are not like that. But when you don't have a complete family unit, you have no one to make those corrections.
Well, and also when parents use that as a babysitter.
Absolutely.
Right?
So who's making those corrections when mother, usually mama, is actually playing both roles in the family? Who making those corrections when mama's actually working 2 or 3 jobs to make ends meet? You know, so what ends up happening, now you got this child with all that anger, which is what I said to you when we saw the video. That's anger, brother.
Yeah.
You know, how do you control that anger? How do you actually coach the child into actually using that level of anger and channeling it into energy and into, you know, positive energy to motivate yourself to do something positive for you and your community? That's the approach that we have to take. But how do you do that?
Well, Rhodes, how do we do that? Because like I said, I'm short on answers this morning.
It starts at the home. It really does. You know, the mom and the dad are the first teachers, and then so if you can't affect the parents, the family, you can fix the child, but if you send it right back to the environment, you know, there's no reinforcement to that fixes. Right. You got to fix the family too. Right.
So to Dr. Bradley's point, when he said, you know, when he was at Randolph, when the mother came in there, the way she, you know, he got I had a very similar incident the other day. My read was, I'm not talking to another adult here, right? This is someone who is part of the problem. And as soon as she opened her mouth, I knew that there was okay, this child unfortunately is in a situation that most likely won't be fixed, right? We'll keep perpetuating this because this is the person she's going to have to listen to the most. Whether she wants to listen to me or not, doesn't matter, because she's going to spend her nurturing years with this person who is so toxic, you know, and she's learning her skill set from an individual who shouldn't have children at all. This woman, in my opinion, was pregnant, should not even be on a parrot or a goldfish.
Well, you know, brother, when you're teaching your kids that violence is the way to solve problems, you can't expect the child to go out into the world and not use violence to solve the problem. You know, it's just that simple. Right. You know, they're not going to go out and try to negotiate and talk things through and de-escalate a situation. They're going to go out with violence and say, I got to take you out before you take me out, because I had to take out my brother before he took me out. Right. You know, my mother made sure that I had to take out my sister before and so I'm taking that behavior and I'm just transferring it into the world. You know, and so I go back to the point where, you know, if you really want to destroy a people, you destroy the family. And once you destroy the family, there's no one there to show the youth, the young folks, how to live in a society that doesn't value them. Our society doesn't value it. It is what it is. You know what I mean? So, which means that we have to we have to actually show our kids, educate our kids, and we have to make sure that the institutions that are educating our kids traditionally, make sure those institutions have curriculums and curricula in that institution that value us.
So, Dr. Bradley and Rhodes, how do we do this? Because we all only have a tolerance level, right? That, you know, we don't want to be martyrs for this thing, right? So those of us who can eventually, as much as we want to help, especially if you have family, you start to say, hey, I need to get my family out of this toxic environment, right? So then you start to see there's fewer people who actually have that mentality still left, right? And it's almost like dog eat dog, survival of the fittest, right? Because, like I said,
it's like the brain drain in Haiti. Like all the smart people leave, and so it's like, and the same thing's going on in the hood. It's like all the smart people, all right, I can't do this by myself, so they kind of get out, and they're like, all right, I'll try, you know, like we do, work from the outside, trying to get in, but it's like, you try to get yourself out of that environment.
Exactly, because I know Dr. Bradley, I know yourself, didn't move. I just felt like, you know what, I was fighting a losing battle, and I needed peace of mind. And the neighborhood started changing. Crack came. It was just getting too much. And I'm like, I want to come home and just be your neighbor. I'm not there to spy on you, but I don't want to walk out of my door and see you doing what your drug transactions, and then you're looking at me, am I going to do anything? I don't want to do anything. I just want to go get in my car. I just want to go to the store. I just want to sit out in my yard. That became complicated because, okay, am I supposed to ignore your criminal behavior? Right? Or so I just go someplace where I'm not obligated to do anything except be your neighbor. And then, you know, when you have family, you realize, like one of the city councilors said to me recently at a hearing, you know, we had about violence in the schools, and so, well, you know, do you live in the city? I said, no. I said, did you just not hear this testimony about all the violence? Right? So why would I, if I did have a child, why would I put them in this situation if I could give them something else? That, it's not an elitist position. It's just being a good parent, right?
It's a safety position.
Right.
It's common sense.
But you think that I should have my child be a martyr for you? So if you want to put your children in this situation,
that's your choice.
God bless you.
Yeah.
And I hope they're safe. And I'm going to do everything I can to provide them a safe environment. But knowing what I know, it wouldn't happen.
Well, this is when government policy impact human behavior. When you write policies and you implement those policies, knowing that it's going to have an adverse impact on a segment of society, and you do it on purpose. And this is the manifestation of that, Larry. When you have those policies of mass incarceration, when you have those policies, you know, of using the criminal justice system as a vehicle to address behaviors in our society, where we're trying to achieve what you're projecting as positive, you're projecting as successful, but you're not giving us the means to do it legitimately.
And your point is well taken, because I think you brought it up on one of our past shows where you said that there's a study where they, based on your reading level at age 7 or 7th grade, on how many prisons they're going to need, right?
Exactly. How many prison beds they're going to build.
Right. So who's more overpopulated? That's the only segment of the population
where we outrank. We are more overpopulated
than our population, right? Is in the criminal justice.
Exactly.
Well, that's by design. It's like from the get-go with the 13th Amendment, that is by design.
Yeah.
You're arrested for loitering. Now you're being arrested for voting. Come on.
Right, exactly. I mean, right. Exactly. I mean, you know, you're talking about, and that's what it's a hypocrisy in that situation. You're talking about crime. Serious crime around the country, and yet you're tying up law enforcement resources for arresting someone for voting.
And not only are you tying up law enforcement resources, you're also pushing an agenda that's going to be destructive to our democratic principles.
Yeah.
You know, and we're in a democracy, but yet
are we?
You are pushing.
No, they're making it harder and harder to vote.
You're pushing. You're making it difficult for people to vote, which is the cornerstone of democracy.
Vote up here, but elsewhere they're definitely making it harder to vote. Other places.
Well, stand by for a second. Good morning, caller. Welcome to the roundtable.
I wanted to ask you a question, Larry, about the value of human life. And my answer is, you might not like it, but I'm going to give it to you anyway, is that when we think of the word value, we think of money, yeah? We think of finances. We got to change the word value from the financial sense into more of a holistical, more human-like sense. By that I mean, we got to see ourselves more in not seeing that we're better than one another, but having the same equal footing, huh?
Well, what's not to like about that?
I mean, I don't disagree with that at all.
No, I think you're spot on.
I think you're right on target.
Words matter. I think, see, this is why we have some of the most intelligent callers. I mean, look, if we're not putting a worth on, I guess I'm going to take the value word out of worth, and we don't see the humanity in individuals. Like I said, I just can't imagine what I'm seeing inflicting that on anyone. And then to hear people almost justifying, like, I'll give you an example. There was there have been so many fights this week, and kids, I'm talking about brutal beatings. A couple of students came up to another school the other day looking for some other students, and they found it and inflicted the violence on them. Officers arrived. They now turned their venom on the officers, and they had to arrest them. One officer was punched in the face. Another officer was kicked in the chest. I mean, just brutalizing these officers. Then the question was one of our government officials as well. Could the officers have done this without arresting them? Right? It's like,
no.
What? Are you serious?
I kid you not. What is it? Yeah, I kid you not. Right? How can we have resolved this sort of? What is it that you want these officers? How much abuse do you want these officers to take? Right? We just had earlier in that day a safety person at another school attacked by a family member and a student that sent them to the hospital. Right? And they left before. How much of this, and at some point you've got to send a message that this behavior will not be tolerated. Right? I don't know if like I said, another young lady was shot last night, is in critical condition, because normally when the full notifications for something, that means it's not looking good. And I don't know what her condition or status is right now, but in less than a week, the number of shootings, the violence that is taking place, it's not trending in the right way.
I'll have to jump in because first and foremost, I'm not a psychologist, so don't put me on the spot on it. We don't know what goes on in these young kids' heads on the acts of violence. Also, I would have to add that they had nothing to lose.
Right. So let me jump in there. Fight, right. But here, to your point, you're saying you're not a psychiatrist, right? But yet, that has been most of the elected officials is to put more psychiatrists on the job, right, for criminal behavior.
Well, I think first of all, I don't disagree with putting more psychiatrists on the job. I think that the issue is that the psychiatrist cannot take the lead in a situation like this. I think you don't replace psychiatrists with police officers or police. You know what I mean? You have them there to work in collaboration to deal with the issue. You know what I mean? And so I do think that there are certain things. They serve a role. Yeah, there are certain things that we can do as police officers, and certain things that we have to turn over to the psychiatrist and say you need to handle this. Right. But I don't agree with taking those officers out of the school because you want some type of reform. You have to deal with the student first. Right. I mean, if the school environment has been improved to such a level that we can have education without violence, then I can understand it. But we're not at that point.
But Dr. Browley, in the college, to that point, suburban schools that don't have the type of violence that we're seeing here in the city of Boston have armed police officers in their building. Boston has never had that. We've just had school police officers at the time who had handcuffs, not even mace, right, in a radio, right? But their presence.
But Larry, now you're pointing to value of education. I will give you armed police officers in suburban schools because I want to make sure that those kids who are predominantly white get the education, because I know that you cannot educate in violence, but I will not give you the officers in the schools in Boston because I really don't care about the education. What is happening in Latin? What is happening in the O'Brien? So those are the exceptions, but it should be the norm.
I agree.
They should be the norm because at one point, if you look at the history of Boston, at one point, kings and queens were sending their children here to be educated. Because that was the pinnacle of education right here in this school district. Right. So how far have we fallen? When we have to actually worry, our kids have to fight their way into schools and fight their way out and fight their way on the streets. What are we doing as a society to make sure that our most precious future is being protected?
Right. So we got a few minutes. So Dick, I'm gonna give you a minute as well as Rose. So Dick, like I said, it's early. It's early voting here. Is that a way to change? Because we've had politicians that run and say they're going to address these problems. Mass and Cast folks are saying, I know the mayor was trying to have a press conference down there about the other day, and she got shouted out off the stage there. Folks are saying it's worse than it was, and it depends on who you talk to. The school system is the state was about to take it over because of the problems here. And like I said, there's not much learning that's going to take place in an environment that isn't safe. As Dr. Bradley just alluded to, is a perfect example of that is Latin Academy, Latin, the O'Brien are all exam schools here in the city of Boston. They don't experience the same problems. They don't have the safety issues. There's learning going on there. Why is that not the model for all of our schools here in the city of Boston with a almost $1.4 billion budget? That's not a small sum. And actually, the population of students in BPS
this is what happens when you let the wrong people in office. And I know the mayor doing what she thinks is best, but when you don't have a good support system that's really going to be healthy, like someone just stand up to me to say no once in a while on things that she's doing, that she's trying to help her, it's just going to be a complete endless repeat cycle. And for the city councilors, well, to me, they're a bunch of cowards anyway.
Well, they can get together.
And I'm saying that nicely on the air.
Well, they can get together, like I said, and vote themselves a nice hefty pay raise, right? That's one time they were unanimous on anything that I know of lately. But also, do you think that it's time for an elected school committee? Because I think that needs to be some independence from the mayor, in my opinion, when it comes to this. Because I think the folks there that are at the school committee now is just a rubber stamp of whatever mayor wants them to do. It's not an independent body, and we're the only school district that doesn't have an elected school committee. Now, how do some of these small towns have an elected school committee, and you have a population with the problems that we're having here, and we've seen a decline really since we've had an appointed school committee rather than an elected school committee here in the city of Boston.
Well, listen, this is what I think. I think as long as you have a situation where you have hamstringed the principals, you have prevented the authorities from dealing with those students who are recalcitrants in the school, and they can't handle them, and you're allowing those students to destroy the process of education, you're going to have this problem. You need to have a separate environment, a separate school where you have the necessary resources in that building to deal with those difficult students, thereby separating them, putting them aside so you can continue to educate the people who want to learn. When you start mixing all this, man, the guy who wants to learn can't learn.
Let's say you can't mix oil and water.
No,
folks, just to remind you as well, today from Saturday, October 12th, 22nd, 11 a.m. to 2 p.m., a lunch and learn at Mamleo headquarters located at 61 Columbia Road. It's a free lunch and learn with our sponsor, Cora Holbrook from Guarantee Rate Mortgage Company. Join us and let us help you navigate the ins and outs of real estate buying in this challenging market. We will give you the insights of what affects your credit score. For those with credit challenges, we will give you the helpful information. So, gentlemen, if you're in the neighborhood and you come by for some education, lunch and learn at Mamleo headquarters there today from 11 to 2 p.m. Gentlemen, thank you. We got to take our break. Appreciate it. Feel free to call back because we're going to be talking about this redistricting that's going on, and this is folks are going to disenfranchise folks here in the city of Boston. Yeah, they're drawing their maps. Yeah, here in Boston. Yeah.
Here we go.
Here we go. Like I said, let
the games begin.
Let the games begin. Thank you, gentlemen. Stay tuned. You're listening to At the Round Table. We'll be right back.
And they're playing baseball. Play ball.
Yeah.
Never get the chance to meet ya. No, I came up from the bottom, always rooting for the underdog.
I wrote 300 songs in 1 year, Boogie will tell you I'm on it. I got unreleased songs for days, they don't want it. Eat any MC in the game, it ain't a challenge if your music reflects who you are, then you's a coward. I can see through the lies you ain't living